first thing Garrett noticed was that the truck had been parked in the same spot for 3 nights in a row. Same black Peterbilt, same position backed hard against the tree line at the far edge of the Brookfield Travel Plaza lot, just outside the reach of the overhead lights. No company markings, no dot number visible from the front, just sitting there, engine cold, curtains drawn tight across the sleeper cab windows. Garrett ran a refrigerated freight route between a distribution hub in Memphis and a grocery chain network across eastern Tennessee. He knew this stop well. Pulled in every Tuesday and Thursday around 2 a.m., topped off fuel, grabbed coffee, maybe slept 3 hours before pushing through to the delivery window. He'd been doing this loop for 6 years. You get a feel for what belongs and what doesn't. On the first night he saw the Peterbilt, he figured a driver had broken down and was waiting on a mobile mechanic. It happens. On the second night, he walked past it on his way back from the fuel islands and noticed the mud on the rear tires was fresh. The truck had moved. Someone had driven it and come back, but the cab was dark and silent, same as before. On the third night, he saw the man. He was standing at the rear corner of the trailer, partially obscured by shadow, watching the fuel island where Marcus was standing with the nozzle in his tank. Not moving, not on a phone, just watching. When Marcus looked directly at him, the man stepped backward into the darkness between the trailer and the tree line and didn't come back out. Marcus finished fueling, locked his cab, and called his dispatcher. He wasn't sure what to say exactly. A truck that keeps coming back. A man who disappeared into the dark. It sounded like nothing when he said it out loud. His dispatcher, a woman named Carol, who'd been in logistics for 20 years, told him to note the plate and move on. Probably someone working a drop and hook setup, she said. Probably nothing. He wrote down the plate. He pulled out of the lot, and 40 minutes later, somewhere on a 2-lane bypass south of Cookville, with no cell signal and no other traffic, a set of headlights appeared behind him. They stayed exactly 4 car lengths back for 11 miles. Marcus knew this stretch of road. There was a truck inspection pull-off about 8 miles ahead, but it was unstaffed at this hour. Past that, nothing but farmland and a long grade before the interstate junction. He watched the headlights in his mirror. They didn't drift. They didn't speed up. They held their position with a consistency that didn't feel casual. A tired driver follows erratically. A distracted driver drifts. These lights held like something deliberate. He picked up his CB, put out a general call on Channel 19, asked if anyone was southbound on Route 70. Nothing came back. He tried his cell, 1 bar, then none. He made a decision. Instead of taking his normal route at the junction, he pulled onto the interstate and pushed his speed up to 75. The headlights followed. Onto the ramp, onto I-40, maintaining that same 4-length gap through the merge and into the passing lane. Marcus drove 22 miles on the interstate before the headlights finally fell back and exited. He didn't stop until he reached a Flying J with a full lot, a 24-hour diner, and 3 other trucks already fueled and idling near the entrance. He sat in his cab for a long time before he went inside. The next morning, he filed a report with the county sheriff's office in the jurisdiction where he'd first seen the Peterbilt. 3 weeks later, a detective called him back. The plate he'd written down had come back to a truck reported stolen out of a freight yard in northern Georgia 8 months earlier. The detective mentioned they'd been tracking a pattern of cargo theft in that corridor refrigerated loads, specifically high-value grocery freight. The method involved surveillance at known truck stops, identifying routes, and running interdiction on isolated stretches of highway. The detective said they believed at least 2 drivers had been forced to stop and had their loads taken at gunpoint in the previous year. Neither driver had been seriously hurt, but neither had reported being watched at a truck stop in the days before it happened. Marcus had, and they never found the Peterbilt again. He still runs that route, but he doesn't stop at Brookfield anymore, and he checks his mirrors differently now, not looking for other drivers, but looking for consistency, for that steady, deliberate distance that doesn't waver. Because the thing about being followed by someone who knows what they're doing is that it doesn't look like danger. Caleb had been hauling a dry van load of electronics boxed laptops, peripherals, about $340,000 worth of cargo on a straight shot from a distribution center outside Louisville to a receiving dock in Charlotte. His front left tire started pulling around midnight, somewhere in the mountains of eastern Kentucky on a stretch of 119 that didn't have a shoulder so much as a suggestion of one. He nursed it for 2 miles to a gravel pull-off barely wide enough for his trailer, got out with his flashlight, and confirmed what he already suspected. Sidewall split. He wasn't going anywhere on that tire. He called his fleet's roadside assistance line. They told him 90 minutes for a service truck. He climbed back into his cab, left his hazards running, and settled in. The first vehicle to stop was a pickup truck. An older model, dark blue or black. It was hard to tell. It pulled in about 30 feet behind his trailer and sat there with its engine running. The driver didn't get out, didn't flash his lights to ask if help was needed, just sat there, running. Danny watched it in his mirror for 5 minutes before it pulled back onto the road and disappeared. 20 minutes later, a second vehicle slowed as it passed. A white panel van, no markings. It didn't stop, but it slowed significantly enough that Danny could see the silhouette of the driver leaning slightly toward the passenger window, looking. Then it was gone. He called his wife. He didn't tell her what he was watching, just wanted to hear a voice. They talked for a while, and then his signal dropped. He tried dispatch. Intermittent. He got through long enough to update them on his location and ask them to confirm the ETA on the service truck. Still 60 minutes out, they said. The pickup came back. It pulled in behind his trailer again. Same position. This time, 2 men got out. They walked toward his cab from the driver's side, and something about the way they moved, not hurried, not casual, something in between, made Danny reach under his seat for the tire iron he kept there. He locked both doors. He turned his CB to channel 9, which is the emergency channel, and keyed the mic and said his location out loud. Twice. Then he sat back and waited. The men knocked on his driver's window. Danny cracked it half an inch. They said they were asking if he needed help. One of them was smiling. His hands were in his jacket pockets. The other stood back a few feet, to the side, not looking at Danny but scanning the road in both directions. Danny told them roadside was already on the way. He told them he was fine. He left the CB open. One of the men said something about having a spare that might fit, that they'd be happy to take a look. Danny said no. He said it once, clearly, and then he stopped responding. He stared forward through the windshield and held the tire iron in his lap and waited. They stood there for a while, maybe 3 minutes, which is a long time to stand beside a stranger's truck on a mountain road at midnight after being told no. Then they walked back to the pickup. They didn't leave. They sat. Danny got back on the CB. He broadcast his location again, his truck number, his company name. He said he had 2 individuals in a vehicle behind his trailer who would not leave. He didn't know if anyone was listening. At 1:17 a.m., a state trooper on his way home from a shift in the next county heard the broadcast and radioed back. He arrived 11 minutes later. The pickup left before the trooper pulled in. Fast, but not so fast it looked like running. The service truck arrived 40 minutes after that. Danny was back on the road by 3 a.m. He delivered the load on time, signed the paperwork, and drove 4 hours back to Louisville. He didn't file a formal report. He wasn't sure what he'd even report. 2 men who stopped to help and then left when a cop showed up. It sounds like nothing when it's written down. But here's what Danny found out 2 months later, completely by accident. A driver he knew, guy named Rel who ran a similar route, mentioned hearing about a crew operating in eastern Kentucky targeting high-value electronics shipments. The method, according to what Rel had heard from another driver who'd talked to an insurance investigator, involved spotting a disabled truck, confirming the cargo type from the placard, or by getting close enough to read the bill of lading through the window, and then either coercing the driver to open the trailer or returning later with enough people to manage the situation. They targeted lone drivers on isolated roads. They targeted breakdowns, because a driver with a dead truck and no cell signal is as alone as a person can be without anyone knowing it. Danny had a high-value electronics placard visible on his trailer that night. He still thinks about the man with his hands in his jacket pockets, the way the other one kept watching the road. The 3 minutes they stood there after he said no, just calculating. Renata was running an overnight flatbed load steel coils, about 42,000 pounds eastbound on a state route through rural Illinois. She'd been driving since 9 p.m., and it was now past 3 in the morning. The route passed a small way station that she'd been through dozens of times. The closed sign was lit, bypass lane open, standard. She was already steering into the bypass when she saw him. A man in a reflective vest and dark pants, standing on the apron just past the closed bay, waving a flashlight in a slow arc. The kind of signal that means pull over. Renata slowed. Her gut told her something was off immediately, and she'd learned over 8 years of long-haul freight to trust that feeling without being able to fully explain it. The vest looked right. The flashlight pattern looked like a pullover signal. But the way station was closed, and there was no marked cruiser, no dot vehicle, nothing with lights that she could see. She pulled in slowly and stopped. She didn't shut off the engine. She did not open her window more than 2 inches. The man approached from her driver's side. He was wearing a vest, dark shirt, no visible badge. He said there had been reports of an overweight flatbed on this route, and he needed her to pull forward to the scale. His tone was measured, official sounding. His hands were visible. He looked the part. Renata asked for his badge number and the name of his department. The man paused just a half second. The kind of pause you don't consciously register unless you're looking for it. He said he was with the state, and the badge was on his other vest. Renata said she'd need to see it before she moved the truck. She said it calmly. She reached for her phone and opened the camera, held it up so it was visible through the window gap. The man told her she was required by law to comply with a lawful inspection. Renata said she understood, and she'd comply as soon as she saw a badge and a department ID, and that she was also going to call her company's compliance line right now to log the stop, which was standard procedure. None of this was true. There was no compliance line, but she said it like there was. The man walked away from her cab without another word. He walked around the front of the scale building and out of her sight. She waited. He didn't come back. She pulled forward, out of the apron and back onto the bypass lane, and she drove. She called her dispatcher and stayed on the phone for the next 40 miles. She described the man, the vest, the location, the exact wording he'd used. Her dispatcher called the Illinois State Police non-emergency line while she was still on the road. The state police confirmed that no inspection personnel were assigned to that way station that night. It was closed and unstaffed. The investigation that followed turned up more than anyone expected. Over a period of about 4 months, 3 flatbed drivers had reported being stopped at or near closed way stations by individuals in reflective vests. 2 of them had complied and pulled into the scale area. One had his load of copper wiring stripped from the trailer in under 12 minutes by a crew that appeared the moment the driver stepped out of the cab. The other had managed to drive out when he saw a second vehicle pull in behind him and block his exit, but barely. Copper, steel, high scrap value metal loads, all flatbeds, all overnight, all stopped by someone who knew enough about inspection protocol to look credible for the 30 seconds it takes to get a driver to pull over. Renata had a steel coil load that night. Her scrap value alone was significant. The man in the vest was never identified. The crew behind the copper theft was partially broken up 6 months later in a freight investigation, but the individuals directly involved in the fake stops were never charged. The method, investigators noted in a freight security bulletin that circulated through several trucking associations, was simple enough to replicate. A vest, a flashlight, a closed way station, the assumption that authority means compliance, and the specific targeting of drivers alone in the dark, on routes where the next vehicle might be 20 minutes behind them. Renata printed that bulletin and keeps a copy in her cab. She's shown it to every new driver she's mentored since. The line she always comes back to, the one that stayed with her from that night, is simple. The real ones have badges. Anyone who tells you the badge is somewhere else is telling you something important. You just have to be listening for it.